Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi. Coming up in this edition, Spanish King Felipe VI has vowed to provide hope to communities affected by the floods after locals vented anger during his visit. The final phase of a polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza has resumed following an Israeli attack. And China's Shenzhou 18 crew has returned to Earth after spending 6 months on the Tiangong space station. We begin in Europe. Spanish media say floods have hit the city of Tarragona to the north of Valencia. More than 200 people died in floods in Valencia, with many still missing. Residents have been venting anger over the flood response and the lack of warning. Hundreds of residents of a worst-hit suburb protested during a visit by Spanish King Philip. The king has vowed to give hope to the affected communities. He told emergency services that the anger had to be dealt with.
We have to deal with the anger and the frustration of many people because of how bad they've had it. We have to give them hope, attend to the emergency, and also give them hope and guarantee them that the state in all its fullness is present.
Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez also visited the flooded and mud-covered streets in the region before bodyguards had to rush him off the scene as the crowd shouted insults. Ken Brown reports.
The tears continue to flow in Valencia. This school in La Torre has become a medical centre and a drop-off and distribution point for the basic needs. People queuing here from the worst-hit areas to get food, water, milk and hygiene supplies. And the Mestalla Stadium, home to Valencia Football Club, has also opened its doors, with food and water arriving from all over the country, ready to be distributed.
The response of the people has been absolutely amazing. This is just one of the points where people can bring all kinds of supplies, food, detergent, blankets, whatever. This is just one point in the city. There are points of reception of this stuff all over the city, all over the region, and they are flooding from everywhere in the country.
While authorities continue the search for bodies in underground car parks, an army of volunteers has come to help in the worst-hit areas.
If we don't come, no one will help. People need us here. Yesterday, I saw Valencia's bridges full of volunteers. It gave me goosebumps.
Here the people come to help because the government don't do the things well.
The volunteers and the outpouring of help and generosity, a ray of light in a dark moment for Spain.
That was Ken Brown on the aftermath of devastating floods in Spain. In the Middle East, the Israeli military says it has carried out a ground raid in Syria and detained a Syrian national for alleged intelligence gathering on its army. This is the first publicly disclosed instance of Israeli operations on Syrian soil during the ongoing conflict. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Palestinian representatives have described Israel's latest offensives and forced evacuations as ethnic cleansing intended to empty 2 towns and a refugee camp to create buffer zones. Israel has denied the accusation, saying it is fighting Hamas militants who launch attacks from northern Gaza. Remy Almagari reports.
The latest in Gaza, a fresh ground airstrike, Israeli airstrike in Khan Yunis city, near a plant, desalination plant, water plant in Khan Yunis city. A number of people have been reportedly killed. That's the latest. This adds to the already tense situation in the territory, mainly in the northern Jabalia refugee camp and Beit Lahia town, also Jabal al-Nazla town. There have been a number of strikes, including one in Beit Lahia town, another in Jabal al-Nazla, in which about 10 people have been killed. Now adding to the fresh ground Israeli bombardment in southern Khan Yunis city, the number is getting higher than ever. In terms of the political, at the political level, actually, both Hamas and Fatah, the rival Hamas and Fatah parties, have been meeting in Cairo in their drive towards forming an administrative committee, a technocratic administrative committee agreed by the Palestinian presidency that is non-affiliated. They both agree to that, and Egyptian mediators who have hosted the meeting say that both sides have shown a great deal of flexibility.
That was Remy Al-Magari reporting on the Middle East tensions. Meanwhile, the final phase of a polio vaccination campaign resumed over the weekend in northern Gaza. 6 people, including 4 children, were wounded after Israeli forces dropped a stun grenade on a vaccination center in Gaza City. The attack came despite Israel agreeing to a humanitarian pause. The World Health Organization says it is extremely concerned. Alina Al-Yazi has more.
The World Health Organization and UNICEF announced the 3rd round of the polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza began on Saturday after being postponed 10 days ago due to heavy shelling and mass evacuation orders. This time, however, it will be limited to just Gaza City. It's been a struggle for many families to safely bring their children to vaccination centers.
We came here to vaccinate our children with the 2nd vaccine to protect them from diseases in light of the lack of immunity and food and the war we're experiencing. As you know, Gaza is in difficult conditions due to lack of hygiene and pollution in drinking water. So we came to protect them from the aggravation of diseases.
The World Health Organization said the final phase of the campaign had hoped to reach about 119,000 children in northern Gaza with a 2nd dose of the vaccine. To stop the local polio transmission, at least 90% of children under 10 need to be vaccinated.
The vaccination targets ages from 1 day old to 10 years old. We have added vitamin A to the vaccination to enhance immunity in children under the current circumstances.
Some 216 teams from the WHO and UNICEF will assist in the vaccination process, which has been complicated by population shifts and displacement.
The infrastructure here in Gaza has been destroyed. That includes cold chain. UNICEF has been bringing in refrigerators, ice packs, and we've been also working with communities to sensitize them about the importance of the polio vaccination campaign, which requires children to take 2 shots.
The heads of 15 UN and international organizations have called on Israel to stop its attacks on humanitarian workers trying to provide assistance. The WHO said at least 4 children were wounded on Saturday after a healthcare center was hit in northern Gaza, where parents were bringing their children for polio vaccinations.
Despite the continued intense bombardment here in the northern Gaza Strip and the restrictions imposed on access for children for the vaccination, the 3rd phase of the polio vaccination campaign has resumed, and this is to reduce risk and to reach as many as we can to Gazan children.
That was Alina Al-Yazi reporting from northern Gaza. Turning to North America, in the closing days of the race for the White House, U.S. Democratic nominee Kamala Harris is holding several rallies in Michigan, while Republican nominee Donald Trump is campaigning across Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. The 2 candidates are making a final push in battleground states to win over undecided voters. Dan Williams reports from Detroit, Michigan.
Now here in Michigan, it is a so-called swing state. The polls have this very much as a neck-and-neck race, certainly within the margin of error. Those polls have perhaps Harris with a slight lead, but key issue here could be the Arab American vote. There are some 200,000 registered Muslim voters in Michigan. Many Arab American voters with a big population here upset with the Biden administration's handling and support for Israel following the October 7th attacks. Now, Harris has been on the campaign trail here in Detroit. She's been at a church. She's also been heading to Pontiac as well, which is a key auto industry area, before wrapping up with a speech at Michigan State University in East Lansing. Here's what she's been saying so far.
I see faith in action in remarkable ways. I see a nation determined to turn the page on hatred and division and chart a new way forward.
Well, Donald Trump, meanwhile, he'll close his campaign, we understand, here in Michigan on Monday. He's already going to some 3 other swing states, kicking off his day in Pennsylvania before heading to North Carolina and Georgia as well. Trump beginning his rally in Pennsylvania talking about how he's promising a new golden age for America should he win the election, and also talking about attacking a poll, which he calls a fake poll, which has Iowa, surprisingly, which is seen as a Republican state, suggesting that Harris has a 3-point lead there. He's also went on to attack electoral process. This is what he had to say a little earlier.
The election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of incompetence and failure, which is what we have right now, or whether we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country.
Well, the campaigning in this presidential election has been fierce, but soon it will be down to the people to decide.
That was Dan Williams sharing the latest on the US presidential election. Finally, in Asia, China's Shenzhou 18 astronauts are in Beijing for physical checkups and recovery after a successful 6-month mission at the Tiangong space station. Their return capsule touched down at a landing site in northern China in the early hours of Monday. The 3 crew members are all in good health. Commander Ye Guangfu is now the Chinese astronaut who has recorded the longest time in orbit, with more than 365 days from 2 missions. Sun Ye spoke with Zhang Wei at the Chinese Academy of Sciences about the Shenzhou 18 mission.
The Shenzhou 18 crew returns after about 6 months aboard China's space station.
The samples returning with the Shenzhou 18 mission include 5 types of life science specimens and over 20 samples from material science projects. Among them, more than a dozen were exposed to the external environment outside the space station to observe their reactions under such conditions. Additionally, samples from the container-free material cabinet and high-temperature material cabinet would also be brought back. These will undergo thorough research and analysis on the ground.
The first ever fish tank ecosystem experiment on the China space station was conducted during the Shenzhou 18 mission, featuring an ecosystem of 4 zebrafish and homeward plants.
The zebrafish thrived for over 40 days, during which we observed unique movement patterns in microgravity. For instance, they sometimes swam belly up, displaying behaviors not seen on Earth. Interestingly, the small ecosystem established itself more quickly in space than it typically would on the ground. By uncovering these foundational insights, we're setting the stage for future studies on more complex ecosystems.
Scientists say China's space station has become an ideal place to uncover the basic laws of matter movement and life activities.
In space-based biological and physical sciences, the goal is to explore the fundamental laws governing matter and life under extreme conditions. Our space station has conducted extensive research across various areas. For example, we're examining the biological effects of space on living organisms, studying impacts at the molecular, cellular, tissue, and organ levels, right up to entire organisms and groups. How are they influenced by microgravity and radiation? What countermeasures can mitigate these effects? These studies provide essential insights into the basic principles of life and its adaptation.
The Shenzhou 18 crew conducted some 90 experiments and tests across fields such as microgravity physics, space material science, space life sciences, space medicine, and space technology.
That was Sun Ye on China's successful Shenzhou 18 mission. Now recapping the headlines, Spanish King Felipe VI has vowed to provide hope to communities affected by the floods after locals vented anger during his visit. The final phase of a polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza has resumed following an Israeli attack. And China's Shenzhou 18 crew has returned to Earth after spending 6 months on a Tiangong space station. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, the podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news and magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.